a special guest with you today. Her name is Dr. Robyn Mixon. And today we are going to be talking about her wonderful book, For the Love of Maddie. So, this book and story is one of motherhood, medical neglect, and triumph. Okay? So, I'm going to let Dr. Mixon go ahead and introduce herself.
Hello, I am Dr. Robyn Mixon. I am an educator. I am a mom. I am an author of a wonderful book that I hope inspires many people to make progress, make efficient use of their time, and to share love with their family and friends and everyone around them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Robyn and I have been friends for
Don't do it.
25 years or something like that.
It's been a while.
Yes, indeed. And believe it or not, it's just funny how the world works. I met her mom before I actually met her because her mom was my cosmetology teacher. And so many years later, I actually met Robyn in college, and we've been friends ever since. She's been the same person ever since. Just a wonderful, beautiful soul. Okay, so tell us a little bit about your educational background.
So, although I am an educator, my bachelor's degree at Francis Marion University is in psychology.
Hmm.
I have a master's in mental health counseling and a doctorate in advanced studies in human behavior.
Hmm. Hmm. All right. So I'll ask you a little bit more about the PhD. So a little later on. But again, can you go into the name of your book and what was your experience during the process of the making of the book?
Okay, so the book is entitled For the Love of Maddie. There's also an accompanying journal that probably doesn't get as much attention as the book. But the process of the book was one of, I will say, mental and spiritual growth,
Yeah.
um, because it required me to accept the experiences and to accept that these are the things that make me who I am,
Hmm.
and to kind of inspire me to move forward in spite of that.
Hmm. Absolutely. So, what brought you to actually write the book, or what was that defining moment that said, I'm going to share my story?
To write the book, I was actually,
Ah.
so I guess one of my goals just throughout life was to write a book. And
Hmm.
I just feel like God gave me this story and it should be shared because it was just so different. It
Hmm.
was like one of those things that happen and you're like, are you serious?
Yeah.
So it was kind of one of those, for me at least, something that was hard to believe that actually happened.
Yeah, for sure. It was hard for me to believe actually reading the book. I had no idea. Um,
Right.
uh, Else is Cray. Hello, how are you today? Thank you all for joining in on the live. This is Dr. Robyn Mixon, and we are discussing her book today, For the Love of Maddie. All right. So, all right. So now we're going to kind of go into all of the different experiences that you actually went through during this turbulent time. Um, the road to motherhood, like from discovering you were pregnant to actually going through the pregnancy and delivering the baby, what was that part of life like for you?
Um, for me, almost a dream come true. It was a very spiritual process for me, because I take being a mom very seriously. And then because I was an educator, of students that have learning disabilities, it was very important to me to do
Mhm.
all the things to make sure that I was making the best decisions for my child, that I was, prayerfully in touch and, praying for the best
Mhm.
experiences for her, for all the gifts. I guess for me, it was seeing the process of a human being
Yeah.
from the beginning
Mhm.
through. So, like, I'm going to put all of the things in her reach that I have control over. So I'm going to do all the praying I can do. I can take all the vitamins I can take. I'm going to read to her in vitro. I'm going to listen to the classical music and expose her to that,
Huh?
and just doing all of the things that I feel like, I learn about them in psychology. So for me
Mhm.
to put all the best things in front
Yes.
that I could possibly do.
Yes, yes, and that's a wonderful thing, and it's great that you said that because a lot of people don't think about how crucial it is during that time frame when you're actually carrying the child. Because believe it or
Mhm.
not, all of that because you study psychology, you know how every moment of development is just crucial to our mental state and just how we're going to be as a human being all through life. You know, every moment counts, and even the first 5 years of life is the most impactful period of time in a person's life, and
Right.
it really start to take that more seriously as far as what we listen to and do with our bodies because it affects the child, and also what we're exposing the child to in their nutrition and even what they're listening to. Like you said, the classical music, that plays an impact as well. um
Mhm.
so let's go into the delivery part now. Okay, so now you're at delivery. What is happening during that time frame from, your third trimester to, okay, now it's time to deliver my baby?
So, just in the motherhood experience, I am very excited as a mom to like welcome my child. I know it was a girl. I knew that I guess I had learned that
Mhm,
there was some things about me that was impacting her
mhm.
development. For one, it was gestational diabetes.
Yeah.
So I've been going to the gym 4 times a week. I'm not going as much anymore, but um, I did start getting in the pool a lot, like swimming and things like that, just because it took the weight off and the risk for a lot of different things.
Mhm.
But one of the things that I did regularly that I could continue to do to some degree was water aerobics.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I really liked water aerobics. I was usually there with older people,
Yeah.
but for me it was something I enjoyed. So
Mhm. Mhm.
um it was something I could continue doing to a large extent.
Mhm.
I worked about 45 minutes to an hour from home. So my employer, which was more like a dad figure to me, was more concerned about me driving the
Sure.
distance to work every day. So that was something um, that became more of a discussion. Um, and then I did a lot at the school. So I was a cheerleading coach.
Mhm.
I was a teacher, and then I was a prom coordinator, so it was about prom time because my daughter was born in May.
Mhm.
And then there was the ring ceremony, so I did that as well. And
Mhm.
so I did a lot of different things in the capacity of the school that not necessarily I get paid for. It was
Yeah.
just things that I enjoyed doing
Yeah.
with the kids. So those things became more of a concern.
Mhm.
Um, and then there was where she was attached in the placenta became a discussion at one point because she was too low,
Mhm.
I was told. But during that third trimester, she shifted So it wasn't as much of a risk anymore. So that was a good thing. Um, but I was very excited. The girls that I coached did like two surprise baby showers. Some coworkers that I had at work did one.
Mm-hmm.
And then they had one for the school, and then my family did one. So it was like I had so many things for her, and then just being in public service,
Yeah.
just seeing the fact that people were willing to give back, and even teenagers,
Mm-hmm.
were willing to give
Mm-hmm.
back or to welcome, this experience with me was very encouraging.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and, just being able to see that people appreciated the work that you did for them
Yeah.
and was willing to give back was, almost like, reaping what you sow kind of thing. So I was very excited about that. And then I was looking to the experience of childbirth in itself
Mm-hmm.
as a sacrifice.
Yeah. So,
So,
aside of just the gestational diabetes and the brief scare of her not being positioned correctly, you really didn't have any other concerns up until she was being born, right?
correct. There
Okay.
was no other concern.
Got you. So, at the point where you discovered the cord was wrapped around her neck during the period you're giving birth, what was happening in that time frame?
So for me to give my experience partially
Hmm.
um, on memory, the other part is partially on stories that were told to me, because everything that happened beyond this point
Okay.
kind of impacted my ability to remember exactly what was happening at the time.
Mhm.
But that, I guess, prior to the experiences prior to delivery were more of a memory to me than her actual birth. To me, it was more like finally, because it was so many um I guess
Mhm.
it was just a rough delivery where, um, you know, the bigger highlight was on, are you doing this right? Are
Mhm.
you, doing the right things? Are you saying you're doing it, but you're really not? Or, almost like feeling like, am I doing the right thing? Or this is harder than I thought it was going to be kind of thing.
Mhm.
More so than her actually being born in itself was more like, finally, I'm glad that she's here. And I think a lot of the fact that the cord was wrapped around her neck was not either as much of a stronger memory for me, or shielded from me more than, because it what really wasn't a vivid memory for me,
I
that piece of it.
I understand. I understand. So, how did you feel with the baby not being able to go home, or was going home without you? Do you recall that part?
I do. And so at that point, I was really regaining consciousness and memory and feelings and everything. So I that
One
that
second.
day,
Give me 1 second.
okay.
My apologies. Go ahead, Robin.
That day,
Hmm.
um, it was like, well, where's my baby? Like it was almost like you're waking up and everyone's being super nice and there are a lot of people there. It's like, well, where's the baby?
Right. You know,
And so
this.
they were like, oh, she's gonna come in here soon. It's like, okay. And then when she comes, she's all packed up, like, where's she going?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, she's going home. Well, why is she going home and I'm not going home?
Right.
Kind of, and they were kind of like, oh, well, she was sick, but she's better now. And you have to get a little bit more better
Mm-hmm.
before you can go home. So I didn't realize how sick I was in the moment. It was
Mm-hmm.
just more so of my experiences with what happens when a baby is born and like how is she going home and I'm not? Like
Right.
what's happening?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So at that moment, you're thinking, "Hey, I'm okay. I'm feeling okay. Why is my
Right.
but I have to stay." So you're wondering, are you wondering, well, what's so bad or what's happened that I can't go home?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So it really didn't occur to me what actually was happening. Like I feel like everything seems normal other than everybody's being super nice. So, why is she going home but I'm not going home? Like what's happening? What do I not know?
Mm-hmm. Okay. I'm going to take a second and I'm going to read one of the things that really stood out to me in this medical journey that you had.
Okay.
Um, and it's on page 18 of the book. Uh, Quote, she came in labor, and this is you overhearing one of the nurses, and you don't know that the nurse is actually speaking about you. Okay.
Right.
But to hear this is something to grasp. But I just want to read this quote. She came in labor and delivery. She gave birth but needed blood. She was given the wrong blood. They said her uterus wasn't contracting postpartum, so she was given a total hysterectomy. However, they accidentally messed up her intestines, so they had to put them back in place. They tried to clean the blood with carbon through dialysis. However, her body went into shock. She had a stroke and was revived. Okay, okay. And those like 8 sentences, that is a lot.
Right. And to be able to just say, I guess if you're in that field, you're
Mm-hmm.
able to just, hey, this is the report of what's happening because I'm so detached from this as being a human being
Yeah.
that I could just say this is what it is.
Mhm.
Um, but I guess my only thought, and I'm not sure if this was in that moment or today,
Mhm.
is usually when someone's in ICU, it's almost like people filter what they say
Yeah.
for their own health benefits.
Mhm.
But for me, I found out like that conversation happened when I was in ICU
Mhm.
because the nurses were told that they could only communicate about me in the room. Um, Likewise, they did not believe that I was functional. Like they didn't think
Mhm.
that I able to understand what they were saying or to communicate.
Mhm.
So after the whole stroke and everything, they kind of told my family that if I did survive being on life support, I was not going to be functional.
Wow.
Like they didn't think I was going to be able to like be independent or normal or understand or communicate. They just thought I would be there, but not really functional. So being that I heard that,
Mhm.
it was like, wow, they wait a minute, they talking about me? Is this what happened to me?
Yeah. It's kind of
Right,
even come to a starting point with all of that, but after delivery, you needed blood, okay?
right. Hmm.
Somewhere in that process, they gave you the wrong type of blood.
Right.
I don't even know where to pinpoint where that mistake was made. Was that a nurse's mistake? Was that a blood technician, a transfusion technician mistake? Was that a doctor mistake? Do has have you or your family gotten any answers to that? If you can answer, if only if you
No, we have not gotten. Well, my family at that point had no idea
can.
because no one ever told them that's what happened.
Yeah,
I was the one who told them what happened
I.
because because I heard
Uh-huh.
this conversation,
Mhm.
and they didn't believe me. Like they were like, "Oh, she's delusional. She doesn't know what she's talking about because the doctors already said she's not going to be fully functional. So I don't think she really knows what she's saying, kind of thing." They had no idea.
Okay. Um, it those out of all of those things, the blood transfusion, the hysterectomy, the intestines, the dialysis, your family wasn't aware of any of that. So those are things that a family should be aware of and should actually have gotten permission
Well,
to.
I think they did get permission for
Oh,
the hysterectomy because someone
oh,
had to sign for that.
okay.
But as far as everything else, I don't think it was
Mm.
clearly stated to them what happened.
So they never knew why you needed or why a hysterectomy was suggested in the first place?
Yeah, the uterus didn't contract.
And so that's all they were told.
Hmm.
So information was actually withheld
Right.
as well as
And
just.
and this problem, I guess they already knew it was um more to the story, I guess, from the beginning,
Mhm.
because when I went in, like I went to the hospital from a doctor appointment. So
Okay.
I had a doctor appointment where um I guess when I went in, I said I think my water had already broken.
Mhm. So it's
And
doctor's office?
right, I
Oh,
went to the yeah, I had a regular doctor's appointment. I know it was a Tuesday because all the gestational diabetes patients go in on Tuesdays. And so I said, um, I think my water was broken, but I
mhm,
wasn't sure. But
mhm,
like this was the second time I had felt that way. So the first time I did go to, they sent me to a hospital to be checked out, and they said, if the was broken, it
mhm.
resealed itself.
Wow.
And but they didn't detect any amniotic fluid, so they thought everything was fine.
Okay,
So
gotcha.
then I was sent home. That was like sometime in April. And then in May, I said the same thing. So he was like, well, really, we're gonna have to like speed up this process because patients with gestational diabetes have bigger babies. And she was already full term.
Mhm.
And if you don't go in labor this week, like you're gonna need a C-section next week because
Mm,
she'll be too big.
I see.
So he was like, we're gonna strip your membranes just to move this process along.
Mhm.
But in the process of stripping the membranes, the water broke right on exam table.
Okay.
So that was an issue. And then my doctor at that time was like very apologetic, and we're going to he was like, I'm gonna come straight there. Now my doctor's office right across the street from the hospital. So he got to pass the hospital, get home that day. And judging by the the communication at that time, I could tell this is serious. This was not an everyday occurrence. So I truly believe that once he got off from work that day, he was gonna come to the hospital. Did not come.
Really?
Did not come.
Mhm.
Um, and so then at some point during the delivery process, the nurses are calling because they need some type of, direction
Right.
on. Yes. No one answers the phone. Nobody calls back. Nobody comes from the doctor office, which is literally across the street. Nobody's answering their calls. Nobody's giving any type of guidance. So the nurses are pretty much doing whatever they feel is right because they're getting nothing. So
Yeah.
my family already knew that there was something going on.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not specifically
Mm-hmm.
knowing what exactly was happening.
So at what point does your doctor finally respond?
My doctor never responded. There was a different doctor that showed up for delivery, which is a problem in general because, like, this was
They,
not a new. This wasn't just the obstetrician. Like, I had been seeing this doctor for years,
yeah.
and so anytime there was a mom delivering,
Mm-hmm.
they would go with that mom, and then you just saw another doctor that was in the office for that day,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
So do
But
you feel that him not showing up was an admittance of some type of guilt or knowing that he did something wrong?
yeah, it was something bigger
Mm-hmm.
going on than what was openly admitted.
See.
Because I had seen other doctors because my doctor was delivering, you know,
Uh-huh.
over time. Um, and definitely throughout the pregnancy, you
Mm-hmm.
know. So it was like, wow, why wouldn't you stop seeing the other patients for me?
So later, if you can answer this also later on, in even after all of this is done, you had some type of communication with your doctor or his office. So
Right? He
what
did
was that?
show up
Mm-hmm.
for some of these follow-up surgeries, but he wasn't there for like he didn't come, wasn't there for the delivery. Um, or maybe a couple of days later after the delivery is when he shows back up.
So
And
for the surgeries, was he involved or he was just there to be aware that they were happening?
he became involved after some time, like after a few of them had happened, and then he shows back up.
Mm-hmm.
um, so I think at some point my family knew, like, well, why didn't you come? And he was like, oh, well, I was seeing other patients. And because they didn't know that, the protocol was for you to leave those patients to be here, they
Mm-hmm.
just accepted it as, okay, he was seeing these other patients.
Wow. So
Right.
like he failed you. He failed you completely during this process,
Right.
especially
Um,
that he knew something went wrong when the membranes were being stripped, and for him to just disappear after that, um, for you to essentially fend for yourself because these new doctors and nurses weren't aware of your history as he was. I mean, he was your doctor for
hmm
pregnancy and even years before. So
Right.
I, that's just disgusting, and I'm sorry you even had to deal with someone like that. That's just crazy. That's unbelievable.
Right.
Unbelievable. So at the point where you discover that the hospital, the nurses, the doctors were told, or they have come to the conclusion that you're probably not even aware of what's going on, you're in a coma, um, and they stop responding to you. Because I read in here, actually stopped responding to you, and you were actually calling for help or ringing the bell.
Right.
What's going through your mind when you realize that these people, are not responding to me?
Well, I never thought they were just purposefully not responding. I thought, like, maybe this is broken, or maybe, things aren't working. Like, I couldn't, like, get up and say, hey, let me go find somebody. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm just there.
Mm-hmm.
And then usually, or I guess one of the times that I'm pressing the button and nobody ever comes. And then eventually somebody shows up and they're like, oh, you threw up on yourself. Let me help clean you up. And then they'll just clean you all up. And
Mm-hmm.
then that's it. Um, so then at some point, because like your family comes, they go, you're in ICU, there's visitation hours and all that stuff. So they're not really there. And I'm like, hey, well, are these buttons broken? Like, why doesn't anybody come when I'm pressing the button? And they were like, well, why were you pressing the button? It's like, because I was sick. I felt like I was sick, but I was pressing the buttons and like there are cameras in the room. I'm waving in front of the camera. Nobody ever comes. Like, is it working?
Wow. Wow.
And so they were like, so I guess my dad was the person who was like, you know what, this is enough.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Sure.
what is happening here? And so he's like, um, since y'all not answering
Mm-hmm.
the calls or whatever, she's pressing the buttons, nobody's responding. Somebody else is gonna have to stay in here. Like, forget these rules. We gonna be here
Mm-hmm.
because somebody needs to know what's happening. So so now he's questioning me about, you feel sick. What does that mean? What does that look like? What did you feel? What does sick mean? And I'm trying to remember, you know, uh, I felt sick. I don't know what sick meant. I just felt like something was wrong. So I pressed the button, but nobody ever came. And then somebody's walking by and was like, oh, let me clean you up. And so they do. And then that was it. That's
Wow.
all I know. But
So
also,
let's just recap all of this because it's easy to get lost in all of this because so much is happening in such a short period of time.
right.
So
Mhm.
everything is pretty much normal and fine besides gestational diabetes up until your delivery. Okay.
Right.
So to speed up the delivery, because out of fear that the baby may be too big in a week or so, your doctor strips your membranes. In that process, your water breaks.
Right.
You go directly to the hospital, your doctor never shows up, and then there's a domino effect of all these other issues that are
Correct.
after your daughter is born. All right.
Mhm.
So after your daughter Maddie is born, you're given a blood transfusion because you lost too much blood.
Mhm.
Uterus isn't contracting, after the birth. All right.
Right.
After that, the blood transfusion causes other issues, and you need a total hysterectomy because you're not contracting correctly. Then you need dialysis,
Mhm.
and then you're in a coma,
Mhm.
pretty
And a
much.
stroke, and then there was a stroke
And
in the process.
wow.
Mhm.
So so now you're in ICU.
Right.
And I saw in the book that at one point you were at 300 pounds
Correct.
ICU.
So at the time when I told my family, hey, did you know I was given the wrong type of blood?
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, okay, she's delusional. No,
Mm-hmm.
we can't really take what she's saying seriously because we already knew she wasn't going to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
So so they kind of go on, and then when I had said to my dad, like, is this button working? Like, people aren't coming. All these things are happening. And so then my dad is like, well, one day she seems like she's getting better, then the next day it seems like setbacks, or so we're gonna have to stay in the room to really find out what's happening. And then somewhere in the process, my mom is like, well, let's find out let's Google what happens if you get the wrong type of blood and see
Mm-hmm.
what really happens to a person. So they Google it and then they find out like, oh man, she may have known what she's talking about. Like, this may not be
Mm-hmm.
all, her just making something up. Right. So then that kind of changes like the tone of the conversation and everything that is happening.
Mm-hmm.
So they come back and they're like, well, how did you know that this is what happened, because apparently there was some argument over who was going to tell me between the doctors and my family
Mm-hmm.
what happened.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then they find out I already knew. Like, I knew more than they knew.
Yeah.
So then it's like, well, how did you find out what happened?
Mm-hmm.
So I told them.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're like, well, you know what? Somebody's going to be in the room at all times going forward. Because this is like, we don't really know what's happening,
For sure.
even though we think we know what's happening.
Right.
So
Were your doctors and nurses shocked that you were so coherent and alert at times and you actually knew what was going on?
they didn't know.
Mm.
And then I think my family was more on, like, even if we're not here, just, let them think what they think so
Mm.
you can come back and tell us what's going on when we're not in the room,
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it wasn't ever let's tell them that they're wrong kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing, because they didn't feel like they weren't getting the truth from them.
True. And that was
So
true,
yeah,
unfortunately. Okay, so let's go into your healing journey a little bit. So after the ICU, and how long were you in the ICU, first of all?
it was just over 2 weeks.
Okay.
Just over 2 weeks. Um, they did find out that like my family staying in the room, when
Mm-hmm.
I was saying, "Oh, I feel sick," and I was pressing the button, it was actually like the precursor to a seizure is what it was. But you don't actually have memory of seizures, of seizing,
Mm-hmm.
because your memory stops when the
Yes.
brain stops functioning. So I didn't know what was happening. I know before and I know after.
Mm.
Guess what I was experiencing was the auras before the seizure,
Mm-hmm.
and then the memory after it
I,
happened.
I see. So what did the healing process look like for you? Because what was it like to not be able to bathe yourself or brush your teeth
So
or
you think like
hair?
you think like that because you can do it today, like it isn't as important, because
Mm-hmm.
it's just something that's part of your routine. You get up, you do it every day. But when you cannot do it for
Mm-hmm.
yourself, and there aren't people there that are doing it,
Yes.
how important it becomes for you. So I know at one point I was like, well, you know what? I got to go to the bathroom. And
Mm-hmm.
I attempt to get out the bed because I don't know that I can't walk.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But there was a nurse there, and they were like, wait, you can't get out. And then this back and forth commotion between me and the nurse. And my mom comes in, like, what's going on? She's trying to get out the bed. And she was like, well, what's wrong with that? She
Mm-hmm.
said she got to go to the bathroom. It was like, she can't get out. And I was like, well, why not? She's like, you can't walk. I was like, I walked in here. I can't walk.
Yeah.
Like, why not? Like, I would get in so much trouble if you fall and this and that. And they're like, well, maybe you shouldn't get up. Like,
Mm-hmm.
just don't get up.
So,
Um,
so the seizures, between the seizures and the stroke, um,
right.
those were the major factors in you not being able to function in those basic things, daily things.
Yeah. And then they were like, well, if you haven't used those muscles in such a long time, you can't. You
Mm-hmm.
know, you're not going to be able to do it.
Okay.
And how they knew that, I don't know. But maybe just, experience.
Uh-huh.
But no, I really couldn't.
Okay. So you
Yeah.
had to get all of these different medical devices and have pretty much, what was it, 24-hour care for a period of time when you went home?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So at the hospital, they started physical therapy. And I guess once I was able to express, like, you know, that I was interested in, bathing or using the bathroom, whatever, then people were there to kind of support that.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was, I guess, the beginning where they were like, I had family there that was willing to help me to attempt to do it myself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but for me, it was like draining
Mm-hmm.
to be able to, if I got up and walked across the room,
Mm-hmm.
that took an incredible amount of energy.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Wow.
So it was definitely a process. And once I got to the point where I could bathe myself at the sink in
Mm-hmm.
the room,
Mm-hmm.
that was all I could do in a day.
I see. I see.
Right.
Okay, I'm going to just touch on this briefly, and then we're going to go into something that's very important. So, what effects did your marriage have on this situation, and what effects did the situation have on your marriage during this time?
Okay. So I think during, like, my marriage was not in the best condition just going into this whole experience.
Got
Um, so while I was in the hospital,
Mm-hmm.
it really highlighted, I guess for me, it was because I was in the church and going to church and, you know, had the feelings about marriage and preserving the marriage and working through issues and trying to struggle to make it work, even though it doesn't seem like it is,
Yeah.
or forgiveness in general. um, I was really feeling like I was working overtime trying to keep it together.
I
And
work. Yeah.
it kind of I understood once I was in this experience how um or why the privacy of marriage really mattered. But in a situation like this, you kind of lose some of that privacy.
Yeah.
Um, and so that in itself played a big part, because now you're going to get into people's perceptions of your fulfilling your role as either a husband or wife.
Yeah.
Um, so it wasn't just me thinking this is working or it's not working. Now it's a whole lot of other opinions and perceptions and how you perceive yourself, even
Mm-hmm.
that plays into a lot of it. But ultimately, I'm on life support. Things really weren't going well at the beginning, and I had a conversation with my husband at the time during my experience in ICU.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, listen, uh, time. Time became, as with most people, like I know I've read a lot about it in different psychology classes, how people experience these life-threatening situations that kind of change their perceptions of time.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, it was like you're not gonna live forever. It almost like I felt like I was out of time
Mm.
and I wasn't using the time I had wisely.
I see what you're saying.
So this experience really highlighted for me, like, everybody has a gift. You have a purpose to fulfill on the earth, and your time should be spent fulfilling that purpose, whatever it is, or discovering that purpose. And so the conversation I had with him is like, listen, I cannot use my time like this
Yeah.
anymore. Well, what does that mean? Because now you have somebody who feels like they're out of time talking to somebody who feels like they got all the time in the world. Because I mean,
Interesting.
I probably felt that way before this experience. And I don't know
Mm-hmm.
if, having an experience like this highlights
Yeah.
the fact that, I guess there's a scripture, teach me to number my days. Like, this is a
Mm-hmm.
lesson.
Yeah.
um, but I was like, listen, I cannot spend my time trying to get along with you. Like, that That's not
Just
already fitting
wasn't the time. Was not the time to and to
it's
spend
gotta
time
be some
getting on with
reciprocity in
yes,
the
for sure.
um
For sure.
so I just felt like I had to use my time
Mhm.
differently going forward because I didn't feel like I was using it wisely in that moment.
Do
And
you
so
truly think that he grasped the magnitude of what you were going through?
um I don't think so.
Mhm.
I mean, you would think um that I guess ideally in my opinion, I
Mhm.
don't know if this is right, wrong, or indifferent,
Mhm.
but for someone, at least when you're looking at the roles of a male and a female, or
Mhm.
a husband and a wife,
Mhm.
it's to care or concern for somebody
Mhm.
should not be the thing that you have to teach somebody. Like it should be automatic.
Yeah. And with
Um,
marriage especially that they would understand, what's needed going into a marriage, you know?
right. And
Mhm.
for me, I think personality wise, there are certain things that I always was like, you know what? I shouldn't have to tell you certain things. Like
Mm,
you have to come to the table with a certain thing. But to me, maybe this experience highlighted
gotcha.
that, it wasn't as important as you, or you didn't interpret the situation the right way. Um, or even, I mean, even to look at it from a different perspective, because I probably overanalyze most things.
Mm,
And I'm like, okay, so everybody doesn't respond the same way.
true. True indeed.
Why?
Mhm. Mhm.
Right. So, grief or sadness or whatever, it doesn't look the same way for each person, but the way you respond to it is
Mhm.
glaring.
Yeah.
And so that became more of an issue
Got
before and after. It was like,
mhm.
even if you had these problems before, after an experience like this, most people are like, oh my gosh, we got to do things differently, or you got to respond differently, or whatever it is. And I just didn't think that was happening
Yeah.
afterwards.
Means a lot. It truly means a lot,
Yeah.
you know,
Hmm.
to not be able to just get the basics of what you need, especially in a time like that.
Right.
What I mean? Um, so only if you can or if you want to share, like,
Okay.
have there been any legal ramifications behind all of this? I know it's 10 years later. And what has been the whole broad scope of all of that?
Um, no, I attempted, but ultimately, the paperwork that you signed to get in the hospital to deliver
Mm, it
is the
kind
paperwork that stops you
mhm,
from getting um, reciprocity after the fact.
yeah. So it kind of
Um,
it kind of relieves them of any and all responsibility, basically.
to a large extent, yes. And then the fact that it's considered life threatening or
Mm,
whatever kind of alleviates them of a lot of things. Now, when I did leave, there were lots and lots of follow ups of appointments, visits. I didn't pay anything. And that's another thing. If you don't pay for something, you
mhm.
can't really sue for it. So, um,
Interesting.
yeah. So when I get there for like a follow up to whatever it is, because they really did want to do another surgery.
Mhm.
And I kind of wised up and was like, okay, well, I have to get a second opinion
Yeah.
from a different person.
Mhm.
I also wised up in the capacity that the doctors that I see, like just because you have MD by your name does not mean that's the place I should be. I had a nephrologist at the time who
Mhm.
was pregnant, and I was like, well, who do you see?
Yeah.
Where are you going?
Mhm. Mhm.
And that was the person that I went to
Gotcha.
get the follow-up, and he was like, there's nothing in the records, which is another thing. But
What do you
there,
nothing? What wasn't in your records?
well, you're at the documentation of what's there. So if you were going to seek, some type of legal
Mhm.
ramifications, they're going to pull your medical records,
Yeah.
right? So there's
So
not much in there.
are you saying that
There
there's
wasn't much in
information
there. Mm-mm.
missing?
Everything was not in there. You get like a summary printout.
Uh-huh.
Um,
And
no,
there's no
there's
pursuing.
not much in there.
There's no pursuing that.
Well, they said that for one, you would have to have a medical expert that would be willing to go against what was there, and that would have been difficult to find. Um, and then it was just no, it didn't happen. But I did attempt. I attempted, but no,
Totally, totally disgusting.
right.
Totally
And we're at the liberty of what they document.
You're
So,
you're you are correct. And they're going to do whatever they can to shield themselves. Um, when they actually take a hypocritical oath,
hmm,
doctors take an oath. And
they do.
it just makes you truly think about the hands that we put our lives into when we enter into a hospital. And Black people in general, Black
Hmm.
women, have a very deep and dark history when it comes to medical facilities and giving birth,
Right.
unfortunately. And on another note, not totally disconnected, but in the same vein, we are more recommended to get hysterectomies when it comes to things like uterine fibroids or anything else that may be going on in our uterus. Um, hysterectomies are overly recommended to us when we are having any type of issues in our female tract. Just want to put that out there for you all just to go and investigate and dig into, because um, unfortunately it's nothing new. Um, and unfortunately, we are still experiencing these types of things. Even with all of the advances that we've had and how far we've come as a people, we're still battling with things like medical neglect, our pain being dismissed, procedures and different medications being overly prescribed to us. You know,
Right.
so another very important thing I want to ask you about is the role that your family played in this whole procedure, in your healing process. Your dad, your mom, and how them being an advocate for you played such a huge role in your recovery.
Right. So my parents really became very, very, very involved. My dad, I talked to maybe once a week or maybe every other week prior to this whole experience. We
Mhm.
talk on a daily basis today. Um, but it wasn't that I wouldn't say that we had a bad relationship. We just didn't really communicate much. It was kind of if he needed something or he wanted
Mhm.
me to do something for him, I would go do that thing. But we didn't really um, talk like on a regular basis or to the depth of discussions that we have
Mhm.
now. And I think that process was essential to, for them to be there. I think one of the glaring things from that experience that was um, important to me at the time, one of the nurses and I, which is in the book,
Mhm.
had got into a conflict. And the nurse was saying you kind of get whatever you want in the hospital because your mom is the mom that trumps other moms, and you get special treatment and things like that to me. And so I told my dad, my parents when they came back,
Mm-hmm.
and so my dad was like, "She might not be special to you, but
Mm-hmm.
she's special to me."
Yeah.
And I think that was a major factor where, like, I don't know if I ever heard my dad say something like that,
Yeah.
but to be able for him to stand up and say that at a time when it was very necessary, or when it feels like all the odds were stacked against you, was monumental. And I think it may have changed, how both of us operated after that point, because we talked on a daily basis. Like even today, we still talk every day.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it's very different than it was. And so I think, I guess, you look for your parents to protect you or to be their support and guide, but you know, they're essential parts and pieces even today. Like when it was time to go to doctor appointments, and
Mm-hmm.
like I couldn't drive after this, so
Right.
my mom was dropping me off to work, or one of them would pick me up and take me to a doctor appointment afterward. We had to pick up Maddie from daycare, and
Mm-hmm.
they were like doing all of this stuff on a
Yeah.
daily basis, and I was living with my mom afterward for a good bit of time as well. So they were very essential in being able to speak up, and you know, they were definitely a vocal part to that whole experience.
So, how soon afterwards in your recovery period did you go back to work?
Um, so I got out of the hospital probably mid-June,
Mm-hmm.
and I was back to work in August.
Wow. Wow. And so you actually got your PhD 6 months after you gave birth as well. So
Right,
you had already started the process before you had the baby.
right.
You actually,
I
right?
started. I was I had written 3 chapters, but as you know, it's a whole lot of revising and correcting and the whole process. Ironically, the advisor that I met like maybe at the beginning of May, right before Maddie was born, because she came down here for a conference, and she called me and was like, "Hey, I'm gonna be in your area,
Mm-hmm.
and I'd like to meet you. Maybe we can go for lunch or something." I was like, "Okay, sure."
Mm-hmm.
When? And we met up, and she was like, "I didn't know you were pregnant." And I was like, "But why would you why would you need to know that? Like, I'm doing the work.
Mm-hmm.
I'm turning it in.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not really, if I can do it, I'm gonna do it." Which actually turned out to be a very good thing because um while it's not like I was further along in the process, I wasn't being graded on, whether or not I turned something in, but you were getting graded on your progress towards this degree. And after she and I met for lunch, a little, maybe a week or two after that, this is when all of this happened. And then when they met for class, I just wasn't there. Nobody knew what happened,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and then the class ended. So she has to give a grade. What grade is she going to give? Like, I wasn't there.
To give a grade.
What
Yep.
grade is she? Right. So um, I talked to her a couple weeks after because I couldn't even figure out how to use the phone while I was in the hospital. Like a lot of things we take for granted, like
Right.
I could not figure it out. Like I couldn't log. When I did remember, like, oh, I was supposed to have class. Yes, you realize all the things that you missed. Bills are due. All these things are happening, and I can't even figure out how to turn my phone on.
I talked to
So I ended up talking to her, and she was like, "Oh, don't worry about it. I knew something had to go wrong if you weren't here." So it was a good thing that she had met me and
Mhm.
had come to some conclusion about who I was, because again, like, I just disappeared.
Wow.
And then and I wasn't in, then there was a break, and then by the time they started classes back, um it was like the fall semester. So
Mhm.
it
So
was like,
how was that process in within that 6 month period of giving birth to actually obtaining and graduating and getting your PhD?
yes, my mom was like, "You have got to finish this now. Like, this is gonna be a good story if you finish. You got to finish." But the when I had the stroke, it was actually on my brainstem, so it affected my vision. So
Mm,
basically, I could look at something. Let's say the word was happy, but there'll be letters missing.
mhm,
I just don't always know what was missing. I guess my example is like going to the store and you see something on the shelf that's 9.99. You get to the register and they're like 21.56, and it's like it said 9.99. No, it said 19.99.
wow.
Just I didn't know. Like I couldn't see the one, and I didn't know it wasn't there
Mhm.
until I get to the register. So
Gotcha.
things like that. So imagine that trying to write and read, for a dissertation, it can just take a whole lot of time because you don't see things that are there, and then I also had a sensitivity to light, so the
Wow.
screens and this and that. So it was a lot of different challenges. And
Sure.
then you got the baby now, and the baby is crying, or this and that. And my mom was very essential in helping. I'll watch her while you do your thing over here.
Mhm.
I'm gonna be over here helping out or whatever. And so that's really how I ended up finishing. And my instructor, at my advisor at the time, she was essential. She was like, you know what, we got to help get you through this process. Like you need to be done.
Wow.
so
Wow.
so she
That
was very helpful.
have like that in your
Mhm.
corner. Mom, big ups to mom, like trumps other moms is an understatement. She was amazing
Right.
in this whole process for you, and to have
Mhm.
your professor and all the other people that came along, and even your dad and stuff like that. It's priceless to have people like that in your life, and you truly see who's there for you when you go through things like this. Unfortunately, you know.
Right.
So how did this experience? I just a few more questions. How did this experience affect how you see the people around you?
Well, it did change my view of people in general, because you have people that you have around you
Mhm.
that you really believe that they would support you in a specific way, or you know um, that they would always be there for you in certain ways. But a lot of that is just our opinions. Like, these people never actually had to do it, we just believe they will. So this was definitely an opportunity
Mhm.
for you to see who's going to do what. And because there was a period of time where I was in a coma and they didn't think I was coming out, people said things that they thought would never come back, or did things, or um, it was like waking up at your own memorial service and being able to say, "Hey, that you're just making this up. This is not really true." you know, because I think when people don't expect you to respond or know that they said something, they give a whole different honest answer
Yeah.
than if if they knew you were there listening to what they had to say.
Correct.
So that was definitely eye opening in the people that
Mhm.
was definitely around me, like
Mhm.
friends, family. Um, it also highlighted the importance of family.
Yes, indeed.
Um, and then again, time, how you use your time, for me, was
Mhm.
became much more important. Like, if I think we take, as women, just because we're always sacrificing. Like, Mother's Day come around, it's like moms are sacrificing. They're
Yes.
very giving, and
Mhm.
all of this. And for me, it was just like, Yeah, but it's not necessarily a valuable sacrifice for you to consistently give to somebody that never reciprocates um, in any way, or to specifically show up and make things worse for you
Yeah.
just to rescue you. You
Mm-hmm.
know, it's like it's unnecessary. So it changed where I spent my time,
Mm-hmm.
with whom I spent time,
Mm-hmm. So
and how,
yeah,
um, and even how much time.
true.
It affected who I wanted around me and how I evaluate who was around me.
Mm-hmm.
Because now I have a daughter.
Yep.
Whether she's going to learn a lot about me by the people that I keep around
It's true.
or the way people treat or respond to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so, whatever I do wrong, I don't want to convey that to my child.
Right.
You
Right.
know, so even if I were doing it, I'm definitely not going to be doing that, or
Mm-hmm.
I don't want her to learn directly or just by association to
Mm-hmm.
do this, because if they were doing it, you'd ask them to stop.
Yes, you're right.
so
You're
so
right.
I stopped. So I stopped,
So,
because it just is, it's not a sacrifice, it's
mm-hmm.
just abuse.
Mm. Mm.
That's what it is.
So, even more importantly than how this experience shaped the people, how you think about the people around you, how did this experience shape you or reshape you? And I know you just went into the value of your time and everything like that, but how did it shape how you treat yourself? How did it change you spiritually, emotionally? How did it change how you view your future?
um the one thing I learned from this experience was that nobody abuses you more than yourself, right?
That
um
far.
Yeah, and no one mistreats you more than than you mistreat yourself.
Mm,
And one of the experiences I've learned, at least even from writing the book, was to embrace who I really was, and
mm,
especially after earning the PhD. Although I at work I was Dr. Robyn Mixon. A lot of times people talk to me, or when I introduce myself as Robyn Mixon.
mhm,
And then when I was placed into a situation where I was presenting my book next to someone whose name was also Robyn, I
mhm,
became the other Robyn.
mm,
And I met someone who was like, I was like, oh, I see you got your PhD too. And she was like, yeah, I noticed that you have yours also. And she was like, so why don't you use your title?
yeah.
And I was like, well, because sometimes it's off-putting at like being a black female.
Mm,
You're now a doctor.
mm.
People don't really receive that positively. It's almost like,
So
you know,
you felt the
you have
need
to
to dim your
defend it.
light. You felt the need to dim your light in a sense.
Right. And she was like, no, you are not the other Robyn. You're Dr. Robyn Mixon.
You
And
earned
so like you did the work,
right.
like you need to accept, you know, the respect for doing the work. And it was just like, yeah, you know what? You are right. And
Mm-hmm,
so I ended up being in a situation where I had to go back into the same environment with the same people. And it's like, you know what? This is who I am.
mm-hmm.
I'm Dr. Mixon.
Yeah.
I'm not the other Robyn, and I'm not going to be in environments where I feel like I'm being disrespected, or if I have to downplay who I am
Mhm.
to make everybody feel comfortable, then we're just going to be uncomfortable together. Or maybe I don't need to be there, right? Because again, nobody abuses me more than me. A lot of the things that we do are choices. We
Mhm.
choose to be there. And so, in deciding how you're going to spend your time and how you're going to function in the environments in which you're in,
Mhm.
you have to be comfortable with you. And then that is what I've learned from this. It's like, how am I going to teach my daughter to walk up tall when I'm walking around here trying to be like everybody else? It's just,
Absolutely.
no. We
Absolutely.
all have gifts and talents that we're
Beautiful,
here for.
beautiful insight. Do you
Yeah.
have any advice for women throughout all of your ordeal and situation and experience? Um, Not even just this experience with the childbirth and all of that, just in general, and with that, what advice do you have for women?
Again, I would say just to keep in mind that again, we have as women a lot of responsibility
Yeah.
and a lot of power. Um, and we carry a lot.
Yeah.
So ensuring that you have the right people around you,
Mm-hmm.
that kind of controls who you're dating, who the father of your children are, if they're protecting you the way they should, um, taking them with you into these environments or not being comfortable
Mm-hmm.
with that individual is an indication
Mm-hmm.
that you're with the wrong person because having a child or bringing life into the world is a commitment beyond the marriage.
Mm-hmm. True
You know?
indeed. True.
Um, so it is definitely we convey a message
Mm-hmm.
directly by the things that we say and do, and indirectly by the people that we are around and the company that we keep.
True
So
indeed. True.
that would be my advice.
Thank you. Thank you. This was a beautiful interview. I want to thank you for your time. Time well spent. Okay.
Yes.
I do see that you're wearing your publication, Robin
Hmm.
Nest Publications. And
Right.
I want to go ahead and give you an opportunity to share all of your contact info, if you have a Facebook, YouTube, your Instagram, website, all of that stuff. And I'm going to also link it in the video as well.
Okay. So my website is www.robins. Robin is with a Y, so ROBYNS Nest Publications with the S.com. There's a lot of information on there, including, um, I guess, if you're in the Charleston area, I am open to or starting services for um, career development,
Mhm.
work-based learning experiences for students with disabilities, whether it is high incidence disabilities like a learning disability, um, or credential, the high school credential, helping them to get started in the work experiences and getting all the resources that they can get. So you could find a lot more information about that
Okay.
on the website. My Instagram and Facebook are both at Robin's Nest Publications.
Okay.
Um, so you can find all things me, all things for the love of Maddie
Yeah.
on that website.
Awesome. Awesome. So, okay. So basically the website, that's the main source.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
And it's a Facebook and Instagram, and
Gotcha.
they both are at Robin's Nest Publication.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Again, you guys, this is the wonderful book For the Love of Maddie by Dr. Robyn Mixon. If you haven't picked it up, please be sure to go by and pick it up. We're going to put all the links in the video. I love you, Robyn. Thank you.
You too. Thank you.
And you take care of yourself.
Okay.
Bye bye.
Bye.